Chapter 16. The next day, the ringing phone echoed in the dark room, startling JJ and making him jump awake. JJ groaned and reached out to pick up the phone. He slowly brought it to his ear and mumbled a bit. Hello. His voice was dry and raspy. It was the dispatcher from work telling him that he needed to come in. Someone on the other shift was sick, and he needed to take their place. Also, the captain needed to speak to him. JJ knew what the captain wanted. He was going to chew him and his brother out about the homeless man incident. JJ hung up with the dispatcher and peeled himself out of bed. JJ arrived at the office and brought Sass down. He put him in the outside kennel, then fed and watered him before going inside. He could see Sean was already in the captain's office being yelled at. JJ's stomach rumbled, and his nerves twisted as he walked towards the door. The captain motioned JJ inside. "Jonathan Simoneaux," he said in a harsh tone as he pointed to the seat beside his brother. JJ shuffled in and closed the door. JJ hung his head low as he walked over and sat beside Sean, who was pale and looked like a kid in the principal's office. The captain sat for a moment in silence before he opened his mouth. "I have had about enough of you two and your mess up. I was gone for 2 weeks and come back to this. Sean, you know policy and procedures, and Jonathan, you have been here a bit longer. I had thought you would have handled the situation better as well. I am most likely looking at a lawsuit on my hands, and you are lucky I am not firing you two. However, I am separating you two." JJ looked up at the captain and then to his brother, whose mouth was opened a bit. "Sean, you have 2 weeks suspension. For this and for the incident with the poor handling of your units. And JJ, you will start on this shift tonight." JJ dared not say anything else. He knew they were in the wrong, and he was just happy to still have a job. "You two together makes this department look like a joke. You cut up and act like teenagers." The captain grumbled. "This ends now. You keep your pranks and silliness at home, now go." Before I change my mind, the captain used his hand to shoo them out his office, before he would say something he would regret. The brothers stood up and walked out defeated. "Oh man, that was brutal." Sean closed the door and walked with JJ down the hall. "Yeah, but I knew it was coming." "Sean, you need to do something, man. We are in serious trouble because of what you did." JJ frowned. "We do you mean?" "You sprayed him," Sean argued back. "Yeah, but you tased him." JJ fussed. "Whatever, it's done now. Just go help Mom." "I was supposed to help her with stuff around the house because I was supposed to be off tonight, so you get the job." JJ walked to the door and held it open for Sean. Sean's mouth hung open. "Oh no man, it is ladies' church tonight." Sean walked backwards out and face-palmed. "You deserve it, dipstick. Now go to church and let them pray for you." JJ pushed Sean out and closed the door quickly. He held it shut as Sean beat on it and protested back at his brother. JJ acted like he couldn't hear what Sean was crying about. Sean soon grew tired and flipped him off before running off to his car. The night started off hectic. JJ had written at least 2 speeding tickets, along with going on a couple complaints. The worst was yet to come though, as the Cajun pushed through the night with his trusty 4-legged partner. He thought the highlight of the night was when a couple had flipped their car in the median off Highway 90. When JJ arrived, the two had proceeded to go at it on the hood. Their response was that they were so turned on. JJ knew Sean will love to hear about this one. JJ got a call around midnight to go and check on a woman's daughter, who she hadn't seen or heard from in 2 days. JJ drove out to the residence, which was pitch dark. He left the dog in the car and made his way up the stairs slowly. For some reason JJ had got an eerie feeling about the place. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up as he knocked on the door. The door was not shut all the way, and on the second knock it creaked open. The pungent smell of death hit him, and JJ had to put his arm over his nose and mouth to cough. He called into the dispatcher for backup as he removed his flashlight and gun. JJ had to push past through the smell as he walked into the home. The flashlight lit his path as he slowly entered the dark and dirty home. A few yards ahead of him he could see a bloody hand draped over the chair arm. It was dangling pale and lifeless. JJ announced himself as the police just in case anyone was alive or in the house, but no answer. As he stepped ever so closer he could hear the flies buzzing about. Rounding the corner, he could see a woman lying dead on the living room floor with 2 bullet holes to the chest. He turned to see the owner of the hand. A male sat with his brains blown out. The gun was on the floor by his feet, while skull fragments and brain matter sprayed all over the ceiling and walls. JJ had to take a step back and compose himself at the sight he was witnessing. Most would have lost their lunch, but JJ had seen much like this before being in this line of work. Only a certain kind of person could work as a police officer, someone with the stomach for this stuff. It was a sickening and horrid sight, but JJ had a job to do. He called it in to his dispatcher, but while doing so he heard a whimper coming from another room. He lowered his mic a bit and proceeded to follow the sound. JJ's nerves were over the edge as it was, being just witnessed a horrible sight. Now what could be lurking in the rest of this house? Another person or dog perhaps? He questioned himself. It was sad enough this man killed the woman and turned the gun on himself. Now what else could be in this broken home? JJ slowly reached for the brass doorknob, slowly turning it. He watched the door slowly open and his light peek through the darkness. JJ peeked in to see movement and then crying. He quickly put his gun away when he saw the small boy in the corner huddled up. It took everything he had not to burst into tears at the sight of the boy. From the looks of him he had been in this room a few days. JJ bent down and tried to comfort the boy. "Hey, it is okay." He reached out, but the boy flinched and hugged the corner more. JJ lowered the light a bit and inched his way closer towards him. The boy looked like he had something wrong with him mentally, besides being stuck in a room for days straight as his parent lay dead in the other room. JJ slowly took a blanket from the bed and held it out as he inched closer. "Hey buddy, it is okay now. I'm going to get you some help. Okay?" He spoke in a sweet voice as he crawled closer. He could see the boy had used the bathroom on himself and had been taken care of poorly. This broke Johnny's heart. He slowly put the blanket on the boy, who flinched a bit. JJ patted the crying boy's back and went to back away, but the boy reached out and grabbed JJ. He was afraid JJ would leave him. JJ could feel the lump in his throat as he wrapped his arms around the boy, who had to be about 8 or so. He lifted him up slowly and covered the boy's face with the blanket. The young boy had been through enough already and didn't need to see his parents in the state they were in. As JJ walked out the house, the ambulance as well as other police cars pulled up. The lights bounced off the dark house as he walked down the small staircase carrying the little boy in his arms. JJ was almost speechless when he handed the boy over to the female paramedic. She coddled him and talked to him sweetly as she took him in the ambulance to check him out. Johnny just stood there a moment trying to process the whole thing. JJ tried to figure out why someone would do such a thing. But he knew that he could never figure out the ways of people and why they do what they do. It was homicide-suicide with autistic boy locked in the closet for 2 days. Something like that really gets to a man. Something that horrible stays with you, and the fact JJ was already going through a lot lately just stressed him out even more. It was very hard for him to stay the same JJ, the happy-go-lucky jokester, when he had to deal with the evilness of the world. His brother was right, he had changed, and this was the moment he realized it. Chapter 17. Marina and the liaison Kevin took the long trip the United States, specifically the state of Louisiana, for a business deal. Kevin wanted to start pushing the move and flow of business to the southern parts of the U.S., as the rest of the areas were flourishing. Mexico was now down to only 2 major cartels, and soon to be just the Alvarez cartel. Half of Africa was taken, and after its completion, they would move north to Russia and other parts of Europe. The meeting was with a Louisiana congressman that was on board with the underground plans of the CIA and cartel. The congressman had a brother, William Green, who could possibly help further their business. William would help launder money as well as supply guns through his company to the Ukraine allies. This would help the underground web strengthen and have a longer reach. Why again did we have to meet in this little town? Marina complained out loud to Kevin as she shut the rental car's door. Because the congressman was doing business here and he lives about an hour away. It is a small town, so it should be low-key. Kevin walked in front of her down the poorly lit motel's hallway. Marina swatted a bug away with a frown. Small towns are known to talk. She smashed the bug with her heel as Kevin knocked twice. A big burly-looking guy answered the door and beckons them inside. Another guard pats Kevin down, while the one who answered the door patted Marina down. The men take the weapons and shows them to the congressman who is sitting on the bed. Let them keep their guns, I trust them. He spoke with a wave of his hand as he lit a cigarette. Glad to see you could come on such short notice, Kevin, and you must be Ms. Alvarez? He tipped his head a bit to her. Marina nodded back before taking a seat in the chair across from the bed. It was a long trip, but I was excited to learn that you would be joining us in our endeavor. Kevin started his butt kissing earlier than expected, Marina thought as eyed the 2 men that stood by the door. Marina's own bodyguard was still in the car. She had no need for him in this meeting. I believe in the cause and expect things to make a turn around. It would also help me pass a few bills as well as have an excellent track record, now that we can control most of the criminal activities. He chuckles as he flicked the ashes into the ashtray. That is the plan, not all of it, but a major key component to it. Kevin stood in front of Congressman Green and continued to ramble politics. Marina had heard this pitch many times before. That was why her mind and thoughts began to wander. Thoughts of hers went to the day she killed Fernando, then to Vespa and her insubordinate way, and then finally how one of her devils were killed. Marina would have to start over looking for and training a new member. It would have to be another American, since they were moving forward to the U.S. conversion. This was due to the Japanese giving them trouble. Marina's thoughts were interrupted by a loud bang at the door. Police! Open up! The bangs were louder as the bodyguards looked frantically towards their boss in the door. The congressman gnashed his teeth and angry as he looked at Kevin. What is this? He hissed, but Kevin just lifted his hands and shrugged his shoulders. I don't know, let me handle it. He went to walk to the door, but Marina beat him to it. She pushed past the 2 larger males and turned the knob slowly. She opened it just a crack to peep out of. Can I help you? She asked, putting on a fake smile. Officer Simoneaux, ma'am, I received a call about a disturbance and loud noise. Sean returned Marina's smile with his own. Marina stuck her head out and looked in the hallway a bit. Are you alone? No partner? She asked. No ma'am, no partner, he chuckles. Marina let the door go and beckons him to come inside. What in the heck are you doing, Marina? Kevin spoke as he went to grab his gun. Marina stepped in front of Kevin to shield the sight of the gun. You brought me thousands of miles, and I am gonna have some fun. She growled. Come, sit down, officer. Sean noticed the two large males and the other men as he made his way inside. Sean went to grab his gun, but he wasn't fast enough. The two bodyguards grabbed him on each side as Marina closed the door behind them. She then walked up behind Sean and took his gun. Sit him in the chair, Marina commanded as the men looked at their boss. Go ahead. Have your fun, but I want no part in this. He gave Kevin a business card. This is my brother's personal number. He will be expecting you to set a meeting. The congressman man put out his cigarette and gathered his things. He then motioned his men to escort him out. Sean went to stand up, but Marina put his own gin to his head. No, police boy. I want to have a bit of fun first. Marina's lips turned into a wicked smile as the congressman and his men left. Chapter 18. Letters from the sky. Police lights flashed and light up the night sky. The blue lights bounced off the brick walls, making a grim light show. The cars were all parked around a motel room as a yellow police line crossed between them. The motel's door was ajar as police responded to their greatest fear, officer down. One patrol officer exited the room with his head hung low and grief written on his face as one of his brothers in arms were lying dead inside. He dug into his pocket for his phone as he stepped away to his unit. The officer leaned against it and waited for the person on the other end to pick up. Hey, JJ. Look man, you need to come down here. 10 minutes later a truck pulls up and JJ hops out. He walks over to the officer that called him with a concerned look. What is going on? He looks from the officer to the open motel room. Camera flashes could be seen as forensic specialties walked in and out holding plastic evidence bags. What happened? JJ looked and noticed his brother's unit parked across the street. Jackson, where is Sean? He looked around for his brother and then back to Jackson, but Jackson couldn't answer him. JJ took off running past him and ducked under the tape. His heart was pounding so loud it throbbed in his ears and made every other sound obsolete. He held his breath as his hair stood up in anticipation. Where is Sean? He demanded. A couple other officers noticed JJ coming, and they tried to stop him. JJ, one officer caught JJ around his chest and tried to stop him from going inside, but JJ's adrenaline was pumping so much he broke through him and the others. He stopped at the door's entrance as his eyes fell on the horrific scene. His brother, Sean, sat in the corner with 2 gunshots in his chest and 1 in the head. JJ's heart sank to his feet. His mouth gasped as his eyes widened. He didn't want to believe what he was seeing. His little brother lay dead only a few feet from him. Sean had to work that night while JJ was off. The two had been split up on separate shifts because of the homeless man incident. JJ didn't want to split up because he needed to look out for his brother, but his lieutenant and captain made them. Sean was a hothead and a bigger joker than JJ. He didn't think stuff through and would just react. Sean was the type to just bust open a door into a house or building and not clear it. JJ not only got a lot of heat from his superiors, but also their mother. She knew how Sean was and never wanted him to join the force in the first place. Sean always had to do what his older brother did even if it was dangerous. It was only a matter of time before the inevitable. No, 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 no. JJ screamed as 3 officers grabbed a hold of JJ. As they struggled to get him out of there, everything seemed to go in slow motion as his rage took over. He wanted to kill the person who did this to his brother. The officers finally got JJ away from the scene, but just barely. They stuck him in the back of one of the patrol cars to get him to calm down. The whole time JJ cursed and punched the glass divider letting out. After a while a few of the officers broke away and drove Johnny down to the station, while another drove his truck. They parked at the back of the station, and the officer opened the door just barely enough. JJ came barreling out and ran into the station straight into his superior's office. "If you hadn't separated us, who did this?" he yelled, not caring who he was yelling at. His captain stood up. "JJ, calm down." The captain tried to ease JJ down, but he just made it worse. "Calm down, it is your fault. I should have been there to help my brother. Tell me what happened." JJ paced back and forth the captain's office glaring at him. The captain just stared at him, not wanting to inform Johnny of what happened. The other officer grew tired of the silence of his captain and spoke up. It was a complaint call. Sean went in to tell them to lower the noise. The captain shot the officer a dirty look. "Deputy," he growled. The officer raised his hands in defense and growled back. "What? He deserves to know. That was his brother." JJ turned to look at the captain. "Who did it? Who shot him?" JJ spoke between clenched teeth. The captain just stood there quiet with an agitated look on his face. JJ was outraged, not just over the fact his brother was killed, but also because his captain was not telling him anything. In his frustration with his captain, JJ took his hand and pushed everything off the captain's desk. The captain's nameplate, papers and even computer went crashing on the floor. The captain's face turned red with rage just as JJ's. "Get him the heck out of here," he yelled at the deputy. "Who killed my brother?" JJ screamed as he fought to stay in the office. He managed to wiggle a hand free and point at the captain as the 2 deputies drug him out. "This is on you, Captain. This is on you," he screamed as the 2 deputies tried to pull him out. One of the dispatchers came around the corner to help get Johnny out of there as well. "Come on, JJ, before you do something you'll regret," she spoke softly, trying to help Johnny. The 2 officers finally succeed in dragging Johnny outside the office and into the lobby. When they eased their grip on him, JJ ripped his arm away. "Don't touch me. JJ, we are all here for you. We feel the pain too. He was our brother in arms. We will always be here for you, okay?" one of the officers said. JJ couldn't speak or anything, he was just numb. Pushing past them, Johnny stormed out the building. The Cajun got in his truck and peeled out the parking lot. The captain finally emerged from the office. "Watch him," he growled and snapped at the 2 officers. They dared not say anything. The officers just nodded their heads and walked outside to their units. The others in the building wouldn't say anything, but a dispatcher finally spoke up. "Captain, excuse my French, but that's bull crap what you did to Johnny. That was his brother, a fellow officer, and you couldn't even tell him who was responsible for his death." The captain glared down at her. "Get back to work and keep your nose out of my business, or you won't have a job for much longer," he commanded and walked back to his office. JJ pulled into his mother driveway, killed the engine, and just sat there staring at the house. He saw a few lights on, so he knew she was still awake. This was going to be the second hardest thing he will have to do tonight. The first was seeing his baby brother dead, and now telling their mom. He didn't know how long he sat in his truck just staring out into space, and then it hit him. The tears started streaming down his face, and he just let them flow. JJ hung his head, closing his eyes as he cursed himself for not being there for Sean. He was supposed to protect his brother, that was his responsibility, and he failed. JJ wasn't much of an emotional person. Most of the time he wore a smile on his face and enjoyed making others laugh, but now that he lost his brother, he felt shattered. He was broken. Thoughts flooded his mind of him and his brother. The fun times they had together, hell, even the bad times. If the two would fight, they would still make up the same day, they were that close. There was never a dull moment in the Simoneaux house. Sean was always around JJ, he looked up to him. JJ knew this, and that is why he always looked out for his brother. JJ tried to be an example for him. Johnny took a couple of deep breaths and wiped his eyes with his ACDC band t-shirt. It was time for him to deliver the news to their mom. Rosemary had enough heartache she was still dealing with because of his father being dead, and once JJ would tell her the news, he knew this was going to break her. JJ slowly slid down out of this truck, his feet hitting the concrete, and they felt as if they were made of lead. He slowly closed the truck's door and forced his feet to move. Each step he took, the Cajun felt his heart break more, if that was even possible. JJ knew it had to be him to tell his mother. He refused to let it happen the other way. You know, the way two dressed officers giving you the bad news, then giving their condolences, then leaving. No, JJ had to be the one, so he could be there when she broke down. He walked in through the back door that led into the kitchen. A couple more tears rolled out his eyes, and he slowly wiped them away with the back of his hand. He heard the news blaring in the living room, so he guessed she was in there. His heavy feet trudged forward. He stood in the entranceway of the living room and stared down at the carpet. His mother didn't hear him or see him. She was glued to the TV as she sat there in her nightie. He spoke up louder and his mother jumped. "Jesus, JJ, you scared me. What is it?" she asked as she was concerned at the state he was in. She turned the TV off and rose from the couch. She shuffled in her slippers over to him, clutching her robe tight. "Johnny, what is going on?" she asked after she noticed he had been crying. He fought hard again to hold back the tears. He needed to be strong for her. "Mom, it is Sean." He paused a moment to clear his raspy voice. "Mom, Sean, he was. JJ looked away and down at the hardwood floor of the kitchen. JJ's mother stood in front of him wide-eyed, then the realization kicked in. Was he the officer killed Johnny? Was he? She shrieked. She grabbed his shoulders and shook him to get him to speak. "Jonathan. Was he?" she pleaded. JJ couldn't speak, but seeing the tears stream down his face was enough of an answer to her. He cringed as she let out a yell and then began to cry. She almost fell over, but JJ caught her, and the two slowly slid to the floor. JJ held her close as she bawled into his chest, and they both cried at the loss of a son and brother. For Sean's funeral, police officers from all over the state attended to support their fallen brother in arms. Unlike the movies, where they would have it as a rainy, dreadful day, it was bright and warm. Birds were singing, and the sun peeked from behind a few clouds. You could say it was embodiment of Sean himself, being he was always a cheerful guy, always smiling like JJ and never having a care in the world. That itself made it all the worse for JJ. He wished it was raining or at least an overcast to block out the sun. The reason being he wanted the rest of the world to know his pain, his misery of losing his best friend and brother. The joyous sounds of the day were shattered by the heartbreaking 21-gun salute. Each round felt like a shot straight into JJ's heart. His mother sat in front of him sobbing as they rolled up the American flag and handed it to her. JJ placed a hand on his mother's shoulder to let her know he was there for her. Although his mother tried not to blame JJ, it still was written all over her face. Ever since that night, she couldn't look Johnny in the eyes. JJ couldn't blame her. He should have been harder on Sean, then maybe the two wouldn't have been separated and would have still been working together. Then they would have handled that unfortunate call together, and JJ would not be standing here watching his brother's casket slowly get lowered to his final resting place. Anything would have been better than this. JJ moved back into his mother's house to look after her. He also stayed because he knew it would be very depressing when he was alone. He hated to watch his mother just stay in bed the whole day, only getting up to go to the bathroom. JJ begged her to eat, but she refused. JJ even made her favorite comfort food, and still she refused to eat, acting like she was just an empty shell. It killed JJ even more because his mother was the only person, his only family besides his Aunt Claire, he had left in this world. His father had left them, not by choice. Death was never a choice. It tore him up inside deeply to see his mother like this. He wanted the people responsible to pay for what they did to his family. JJ felt it was his fault that his baby brother, who just had to follow in his big brother's footsteps, was now lying 6 feet under. It was the final straw that broke the camel's back in a mental breakdown. After the first few days, JJ thought he could handle taking care of his mom while trying to mourn himself, but he realized he couldn't do it. JJ finally had to call his aunt over. He just couldn't handle this alone. Sleepless night and the anxiety was causing him to go crazy. Whispering voices nagged him, but he was able to swat them away, for now. JJ wasn't that close to Aunt Claire, but he knew that she could get his mom to eat. His aunt would stay and pray with her as JJ sat in the living room trying to avoid the prayer. He didn't blame God, but at that moment he wasn't too happy with him. The voices cursing at him and telling him it was his fault along with the bastard who pulled the trigger. The evilness of men and the original sin of murder tore him up. JJ wanted an eye for an eye. What he wanted to do to that person or persons, God would not approve. JJ knew it would not be right in the law's eyes either, but he didn't care really. He wanted the people responsible to pay. He wanted them to know what they did wrong, and that they couldn't just get away with it, no matter the circumstances or who they were. The Cajun wanted to let them know no one was above the law. They might have thought they sat on a high horse, but the way JJ felt at this time, he was not only going to rip the person responsible off the saddle, but he was going to kill the horse too. He was slowly giving in to the voices and thoughts. Chapter 19. After about a week, when JJ's mourning turned into anger and he knew it was time to do something about it. For the past few days after returning to work, JJ had been harping on his captain and LT to tell him who was responsible for his brother's death. Of course, they knew better than to tell the raging Cajun, not until the trial anyways. They knew JJ would do something crazy, and they were right. One of the deputies, Jackson, decided to step up and help. Jackson couldn't sit back and take it any longer. He knew Johnny needed to know the truth no matter what the consequences. Jackson caught JJ leaving the LT's office yet again, But this time he would approach JJ with some of the information. Now, what JJ did with that information was totally up to him. At least Jackson's conscience would be clear. "Simoneaux, I need to speak to you in private." Jackson spoke softly as he approached JJ. The deputy looked around to make sure no one who saw them together. "I'm about to get off work, so I'll meet you at your mom's place, okay?" JJ nodded in total understanding but confused at the same time. "Yay man, I'll see you there in 20." JJ walked out the station barely looking at anyone. Jackson needed to talk to JJ outside the station, somewhere no one would see them together and away from eavesdroppers. 20 minutes on the dot, JJ watched Jackson's car pull up the drive. The Cajun walked out the screen door and met him outside. Jackson got out of his car and shook hands with JJ. JJ noticed that his friend was nervous. "What you got, man?" he asked. "Now Johnny, I could lose my job for telling you this, so please do not tell anyone about our conversation." JJ in turn put his hand on Jackson's shoulder. "You know my word is gold." Hearing that put Jackson at ease. He then opened his jacket and then handed JJ a file. "This is the report on your brother's case. The man who killed your brother, he was a bodyguard to a Congressman Green." JJ's eyes widened in fury. "Do what?" he asked, blinking a couple times. "I think they are trying to cover it up, man. The Congressman Joseph Green was in league with the Alvarez cartel. The FBI has been watching him and his brother William Green for some time. I could only guess that is why the captain didn't want to tell you. He didn't want you to mess up a federal investigation." Jackson scratched the back of his head. "Thank you, Jackson. I promise not to bring you into this." He gripped the file tightly. "JJ, please don't do anything stupid, man." Jackson knew JJ had snapped. He wasn't the cheerful man he used to be. The look in JJ's eyes told the menacing story. JJ was going to do something extreme. JJ just patted Jackson's shoulder and walked past him towards the shed. All Jackson could do was shake his head and get back in his car. Jackson knew he gave JJ the smoking gun, and JJ was a great man, but even great men have their breaking point. Some could say the devil got a hold of that boy, for he wasn't the same after Sean's death. JJ turned dark and listened to the demons that whisper in his ears. JJ began tossing things out the shed, muttering to himself. "Where is it? Where the heck is it?" JJ argued with himself. Claire, hearing a lot of ruckus out back, peeked through the kitchen window curtains. Seeing what was going on, she quickly closed them and headed out back. "Jonathan, what are you doing?" Claire yelled, slamming the door as she waddled over towards the shed. She zigzagged around the weed eater, gas cans, and other things that he had thrown out the shed. Claire stood in front of the open doors with her hands on her hips. "Jonathan!" she screamed again to get his attention. JJ shot up and almost busted his head on the shed's roof. His 6'1" stature was a bit tall for it, and he had to stay semi-bent over. "What?" he screamed at her as he paused for a moment. He then went back to what he was doing. "Tarp. I need a tarp or two. Possible 3. It depends on how many there are." JJ talked to himself as Claire watched, a bit worried. "Jonathan James Simoneaux." She called out his full name in an upset and worried tone. JJ growled and stuck half his body out the shed. He glared at her, wide-eyed and mad. "What are you doing? You need to stop it right now. You need to clean up this mess and go back in the house." She pointed to the things scattered in the yard. "No," he said harshly and went back in the shed to dig some more. "You need to stop this madness and go inside. Your mother needs you, JJ. Claire tried to calm him down. JJ huffed and dropped what was in his hands. It clanked loudly on the wood floor of the shed. He turned and stuck his head out again. She needs Sean, and he is dead, and I intend on doing something about that. He glared at his aunt. Jonathan, don't you go down this road. You are all your mother has left, and if something would happen to you. Claire was cut off by JJ's mother sticking her head outside. JJ, go and get your brother Sean, it is getting late, and he needs to come inside to eat. Claire turned around to look at her sister, and then back to JJ. JJ raised his hand and pointed to his mother. You see, she has lost it. She can't even deal with the fact Sean is dead. JJ sniffs a bit. Well, I'm going to make things right, an eye for an eye, right, just like the good book says. Claire tried her best not to let her jaw drop. Jonathan, don't say or think such things, what would your... But he cut her off before she could finish. What would my mother say? She can't say anything. She has lost her mind, snapped. Calling for Sean after we just buried him not but 2 weeks ago. Or were you going to say God perhaps? What would God think? JJ asked, knowing his aunt was a very church-going person. He could tell that struck a nerve as she flinched a bit when he spoke that last part. God, I think he needs to sit this one out. It is just the devil and I right now. Claire put a hand over her mouth as a single tear ran down her cheek. JJ turned back around and wiped his own face. He knew it would strike fear in her to see him act like this, and his own mother would most likely flip out on what he was going to do. That was if she would ever get over this current pain and come back to reality. JJ closed his eyes for a moment to clear his mind. He was going to use this pain to help him take these men out. JJ wasn't going to let it break him down like his mother. No, this hell was coming straight for them. What he needed was a level head and a crazy plan. JJ was preparing for his own death. For all he knew that there was no way he would survive this. The congressman for sure would have tons of bodyguards surrounding him, protecting him for the trial. The trial that he was most likely going to get off scot-free from. It happened all the time, bigwigs getting off with a simple slap on the wrist. Not this time, and not this man. JJ had suffered a great injustice, and he was going to bring down punishment on the congressman. He was going to see the hell in this Cajun devil's eyes before he would meet his maker. In a hurricane of emotions, JJ grabbed the things he needed for his one-way trip and loaded up his truck. He tossed the tarps and rope he found in the shed into his flatbed. JJ then stormed into the house and went straight to his old room. He quickly changed out his uniform and into dark jeans and a t-shirt. JJ grabbed his duffel bag and loaded it up with his things, as well as his shotgun, shells, and his off-duty weapon. JJ then walked out and grabbed a hold of the doorknob. Claire sat at the kitchen table silently crying as JJ's mother stood by the sink washing the dishes. Did you tell Sean to come back inside? His mother asked. JJ closed his eyes and swallowed hard. He couldn't bear to remind her that he was dead. Instead, he just cleared his throat lowly. No, Mama, I will go get him now. With that, JJ walked out the door and towards his truck. Sasquatch began barking up a storm in the backyard, and JJ thought, I can't bring him with me. Not with what I'm about to do. The Cajun walked over to the fence. JJ made sure Sasquatch had plenty of food and water before giving his partner a good scratching behind the ears. Not this time, boy, you can't come with me, his partner whined in protest as JJ made sure the fence was locked and turned and got into his truck. Chapter 20. The rain broke through the dark sky and poured down on the black-lifted Ford truck. JJ sat outside the congressman's house waiting patiently. He had drove 2 hours in the dead of night to where the man lived. Now sitting, watching, and waiting, JJ knew this path was not going to be easy. His brother and mother deserved justice, or revenge, or whatever you wanted to call it. JJ had nothing left to lose. The day before, his mother flat out told him it was his fault Sean was dead. If JJ wouldn't have been a police officer, then Sean wouldn't have followed in his big brother's footsteps. If JJ would have not acted like a fool with Sean, they would have been on the same shift, and Sean would still be alive. With his mother blaming him, JJ blaming himself, and this trash pretty much getting off, JJ snapped. His cold, calculating eyes watched the door to the house, running different plans and scenarios in his head. He was even prepared to die tonight, but not before that lowlife congressman ate a bullet. No amount of money could save the congressman now. JJ shook his leg nervously, trying to figure out which plan to go with. It was something that you should have been thought out and planned weeks or months in advance, he talked to himself. A part of JJ, along with his mother, had lost it. But I don't have weeks or months. Only this short window of time, here and now, to carry out the execution. He answered himself. You could have waited to get him in the courtroom in front of everyone, JJ huffed. No, Boondock Saint style. I want this personal, between me and him. JJ shushed his demons and slipped his Glock in his off-duty holster. He then reached over to grab his sawed-off shotgun, along with some shells. Singing to himself as he placed the shells inside the gun, JJ cocked the gun, and then put a handful of shells into his pockets. He then opened the door to his truck and hopped down. The rain was coming down so hard he was soaked by the time he closed the door. JJ made his way slowly up the driveway, the whole time singing lowly to subdue the voices in his head. The Cajun had been watching all night, and he noticed that the man was alone. He also did his research. The congressman was divorced, so there would be no innocent people inside. No one but the man and his bodyguards. The same ones who pulled the trigger on his brother, no doubt. The faint orange glow from the window let him know the bastard was up. Goody rambled in between lyrics to Bad Company. JJ wanted him awake for the whole experience. JJ wanted the congressman to look him straight in the eyes before blowing his head off. Demons run when a good man goes to war. That is what JJ remembered hearing his aunt telling them this one time. Those same demons that should have ran whispered in JJ's ear, helping him go through with his plan. His Aunt Claire praised the boys for taking up the badge and protecting and serving, but JJ failed at protecting. It took a certain person to be a police officer. Someone willing to run into the danger while others flee, but that same person can snap after being put through so much. A person can only withstand so much weight before they fold and break, and this is exactly what this Cajun did. Most would go to therapy, or seek counseling, or even God, but JJ wanted justice. JJ had nothing left to lose. He had lost everything, so why not go out with a bang? He was certain one of them was going to die, either the congressman, or himself trying to take out the congressman. He really didn't plan for anything afterwards. JJ knew he would be branded as a criminal, an outlaw, but to get in the right mindset, JJ looked at it as like the old westerns he used to watch with his grandfather. He was the gunman swooping in to take out the crooked villain, or at least that is how he saw it. It was against the law now, and JJ was in the wrong, but certain extreme measures had to be taken for this man to be brought to justice. When JJ reached the door, he paused for a moment. Water poured down his face almost in slow motion as his heart raced from the adrenaline. JJ eyed the door in front of him a moment before taking a deep breath. Then, almost like the time that was slowed down raced to catch up with him as he kicked down the door. He raised his shotgun and walked inside with fluid motion. The first bodyguard walked around the corner to investigate the noise. The male was caught off guard and fumbled to try to remove his handgun, but JJ shot him in the chest. The shell peppered him, and he went flying back. Blood splattered the wall and ceiling as the man fell back on the tile and slid to a stop. JJ knew there was no turning back now. JJ peeked around the corner to the next room, a dining room, but no one was there. Only a long table and 6 chairs sat lonely in the dark, but suddenly a couple bullets flew by him. JJ sprinted to the next wall. He leaned against it and listened carefully. He heard 2 voices, one of the congressmen, the other had to be the other bodyguard. He had to take them before they could call the cops. JJ turned and shot towards the voices and made his way to the kitchen. He slid behind the counter and peeked over. A couple bullets barely missed him and shattered the glass that was beside him. Johnny sat back down and quickly reloaded the shotgun. When the shooting paused, he raised his gun and shot back. JJ then made his way to the living room where they were held up. Water mixed with blood dripped down his cheeks. The glass from the kitchen had sliced his face a bit, but JJ paid no mind to it. He didn't even feel it. Heck, he didn't even feel the bullet that sliced through his arm just then. He just stumbled a bit and shot the bodyguard straight in the face with his shotgun. The congressman noticed his last guard was down and went to run. JJ turned to see this and went to shoot, but his shotgun was empty. He tossed it down and quickly took out his Glock. He fired 2 shots in front of the congressman. The man then tried to run the other way, but JJ aimed and took a shot. The bullet flew in front of the congressman, making him stop. The older man knew he couldn't escape. He just turned like a cowering dog and lifted up his hands in defeat. "Sit down," JJ commanded as he motioned the gun towards the lazy boy recliner. The old congressman looked at the gun, then the chair, and at the Cajun. "Meh, don't make me tell you again," JJ growled. The old man sat down slowly, keeping his eyes on Johnny and his hands up. "You are one stupid sob," the old man cursed. "Yeah, my mom could be a wench sometimes, but stupid? It looks like you are the stupid one. You came to my town, killed my brother, and thought you could get off? So, you tell me who is the kuya now?" JJ tilted his head, eyeing the man. "You really think you can come into my home, kill me and get away with it?" the old man yelled. "There will be storm coming down on you, boy." The old man sat his hands on his knees. "Kill him, what would matter? There are tons of other men just like him, thousands of other mothers crying over sons and daughters who were affected by men like him." JJ's demon spoke up. "You need to do it in a way to where you can continue on, to bring them all to justice." JJ cracked his neck as he talked out loud to himself. The congressman's face twisted a bit as he watched Johnny hold a conversation with himself. "Yes, you are right," JJ replied, scratching his temple with the gun, thinking. The congressman was right. JJ would spend the rest of his time in jail, no doubt. It would be worth it though, JJ thought to himself, but the demon wanted more out of JJ. He raised the gun up to the man's head, but knew the bullet could be traced back to him, of course. What could he do to get away with this? Then suddenly it came to him. JJ remembered a key moment when he was a freshman in high school. It was the fall of 1984. Right after school, his mother, aunt, and him gathered around his uncle's big rig. His aunt and mother blew the truck up due to his uncle cheating. The memory gave Johnny Boy the perfect idea. "Tell me, Congressman, electric or gas?" He grinned as he glanced at the stove. "What are you talking about?" the man asked, but JJ holstered his weapon and grabbed the congressman. "It is way past your bedtime, Congressman." JJ gripped the man's arm tight and pretty much dragged him to the bedroom. Johnny tossed Green on the bed and knocked him out. The congressman slumped over unconscious from the hit. JJ laid him out and then made his way back to the kitchen. "'Cause I'm TNT, I'm dynamite TNT, and I'll win the fight," JJ sung as he pulled the stove away from the wall. "Bingo!" he yelled as he unscrewed the gas. He then began to quickly wipe down where he had touched and drag the two bodies outside. With some heavy lifting, JJ finally got them in the back of his truck. JJ needed to go back in to get the bullet cases, but the gas was sure to be heavy by now. He looked around in the back of his truck for something. He moved rope, wood and couple more things before he spotted it, his old gas mask from the patrol unit. He had forgot why it was in the truck, but good thing it was. JJ slipped the gas mask on and went back into the house to finish cleaning up his mess. Good thing the congressman's house was out in the outskirts of town. This explosion was going to be huge. JJ continued to sing to keep his mind off what he was doing. It sounded echoed and muffled in the gas mask, but JJ didn't care. He sang his heart out like he normally did. The Cajun's voice wasn't the greatest, but it wasn't that bad to listen to. JJ wouldn't care either way. When the music bug hit him, he sang. By this time the rain had slowed down to a sprinkle, but lightning still crackled across the sky, and the sound of the low rumble of thunder could be heard. JJ walked back to his truck and hopped in. He was soaked to the bone with water, blood and dirt. He took his gas mask off and sat it on the passenger seat. In doing so, a pain shot up his arm. JJ finally noticed his shoulder wound and winced a bit as he lifted his shirt to inspect it. JJ looked over the bullet wound knowing he would have to take care of it, but it could wait. JJ needed to get rid of these bodies as well as haul it out of there before the house blew. He started up his truck and backed up onto the road. He then put it in drive and took off. JJ looked back in the rear view just as the house exploded. The shock wave and sound from the explosion rattled the truck and its mirrors. JJ watched as wood and other debris went flying into the air. Orange flames licked the air as JJ just turned up his radio. It wasn't too long of a drive to get to the marsh. The brothers' favorite fishing spot would now be a grave. JJ backed up his truck to the water's edge and put his truck in park. The rain slowly began to pick up again, not as hard as before, but it was a steady flow. JJ walked over to and opened the tailgate. He reached in and grabbed the men's feet and unloaded their bodies into the water. He knew the gators and fish would get to them before anyone else. This was a gator hot spot, and a lot of times his dad would release him here. JJ did, however, tie the bodies together and put weights in their pockets just to be safe. The rain began to pour down now, and JJ needed to get out of there before he would get stuck, a 4x4 or not. The swamp mud was hard to get free from. JJ reached in his pocket for his keys and felt his badge, pausing only for a moment to get a good grasp on it. JJ slowly removed it from his wet pocket. The badge shook in his tightened grip. The water ran down the bronze star that represented his livelihood, but he was no longer a lawman. Not after what he did tonight. It was a symbol of what he used to stand for. Protection, service, honor, and duty. But that was not JJ anymore. He had snapped, and this broken man turned into someone else. He hauled off and threw the badge as far as he could into the bayou. It hit the water with a loud splash and sank to the muddy bottom. JJ then turned and walked back to his truck.